Greetings. Welcome to this exciting roundtable on data gathering from the skies. Our non-terrestrial data gathering platform's a game changer. I am Tom Pfeiffer. I'm one of the editors on the Bloomberg Tech, Media and Telecom team in London. And we have a lineup of illustrious panelists for today's discussion. If you'd like to know more about any of them, please visit their speaker bios on the forum portal. We're going to leap straight in. I have one question to kick us off. We've got a kind of space race going on at the moment with all the satellites being put up in the sky right now. With all that implies in terms of accuracy, detail, and the kind of scope of what we can observe from space. So maybe I can start with James Crawford and Yasu Yamazaki. If you had to pick one recent innovation in this area, some kind of data set that's kind of coming down the line that's most excited you, what would it be? Maybe I'll start with Jimmy.
Yeah, so I'll give the same answer that I gave when we started Orbital Insight, which is getting sub-meter imagery of the world every day. And we're not quite there, but with some of the work Axel Space is doing, as well as a variety of other competitors and the continued reductions in the cost of launch, when we get to that point where we can see, because sub-meter lets you count all the cars and all the trucks and all the ships and all the planes continuously. And when we get to that point, and we're incredibly close now, we're down to about 2 meter, 3 meter imagery of the world every day. And when we get to that point, the insights for supply chain management, for governments, for energy conservation, for sustainability are huge. And I think that plus the AI that we're all building to process that quantity of imagery, that's what I think makes this industry really game-changing for so many folks around the world.
Yasu, tell me. I mean, you're in the process of putting up satellites to actually make these advances to give people this kind of data. What difference is yours going to make?
Sure. I mean, we're working very hard. And well, one thing that's really exciting us is the launch opportunity. So back when we started our company in 2008, sounds so long time ago, we really didn't have much, options in terms of launches. Why this is relevant is because we know how to make satellites cost effectively. We were poor. We didn't have money. So, by the environment that we were in, we had to make our satellites, cheap. But we need to have equally cost competitive launch options in order for us to deliver the value to the end user. So we are really excited with the launch options that are coming up, so that we can actually, really reduce the cost so that it becomes market relevant.
And is your data going to be cheap? A lot cheaper than what's out there now because of your costs being lower?
Well, I hope so. We're always looking at what is the relevant or market relevant cost. Which can be really commercial, because our vision is really to deliver as much as possible to more people the space technology. So we're really trying to see what is the market looking for, and so to answer your question, Tom, I hope so. We're working hard.
What's it going to be able to do that all the data out there now can't do?
So I think one of the exciting part about remote sensing or looking at our planet from space is that we can look at we can look at what's going on the ground from totality. So not just a small area, but large area and frequently, right? So large area frequently at a pixel size that is relevant. And I hope that will bring more clarity and more meaning for people like Jimmy and Wade and people who use Richard's platform.
Maybe I can bring in Devaki here, Devaki Raj, the co-founder of Crowd AI. You're effectively kind of down on the ground, sort of waiting to receive all this data and crunch it on behalf of your clients. Do you think most of the innovation is going to come from the AI, as in what you do with all the data, or is it the actual quality and quantity of the data that's going to be coming online in the next few years that will make the difference for your customers?
So AI is as good as the data that you put in. So for us, it's not just about the quality of the data, it's about the type of data that's coming online, and will it answer the questions that our customers want? And that really, it comes down to what are the problem sets we're trying to solve? And Jimmy just mentioned that it's really exciting that we're going towards sub-meter daily, but some customers want sub-meter hourly or by minute. Really, it really depends on the use case. People want the world, but and I do believe that with more and more satellites coming online, we could get there. And so for us, AI has gone to a point that in certain areas and in certain imagery sets and certain types of problems, AI is quite robust at solving those problems. So for example, for a lot of the work that we do on the humanitarian aid disaster relief, if there is satellite imagery immediately after a hurricane or a wildfire, AI could determine which buildings are destroyed within minutes. For example, after Hurricane Michael, we mapped 41 square kilometers of Panama City, Florida, identified exactly which buildings are damaged and by how much, and we're able to give one of the largest telecoms companies exact addresses that they need to send field service folks to. We were lucky in that particular use case. Obviously, people on the ground weren't, but that hurricane was interesting in that cloud cover immediately dissipated after a while. And so we could actually identify right after a hurricane. Sometimes, this imagery is fantastic in its abundance, but may not be able to answer all these questions. So it's not just red, green, blue type of satellite imagery. It's also the other types that are coming on board, which is SAR data, radio frequency signals. There's a lot that is out there that could be stitched together that then makes the AI valuable and useful to the end user.
I mean, you're a relatively new company that serves a wide range of industries. I mean, and you sort of present your service as a kind of DIY product that customers kind of take and adapt to their own purposes. Can you sort of tell us a bit about how that's gone and what were the bumps along the road? And do you still need a pretty big kind of customer service department to sort of help them out with their technical queries?
Yeah, so what we realized was that there's a lot of imagery available. It's not just satellite, it's drone, cell phone camera, surveillance camera, et cetera. And a lot of these companies want to extract data from that. So we're providing the AI platform to enable companies to build their own AI solutions. We would like folks that interact with their imagery on a day in, day out basis to use us as a outsourced data science platform. I think given the amount of knowledge out there for people to review imagery and video on easy to use platforms like Esri, if you add that layer of here, let us help you automate your own workflow, then it helps with the adoption piece much faster for large scale imagery.
Thank you. I'll bring in Richard Cook here, who's at Esri, whose sort of complex mapping products are used by police forces, oil facilities, a huge range of kind of clients. I mean, you deploy a huge variety of data to build your real-time maps, but where's the biggest kind of missed opportunity if only the kind of quality and range of the space observation data that you can access is able to improve?
That wasn't what I thought you were going to ask me. That's interesting. So missed opportunities. Look, honestly, I don't think there's any use case or any problem that isn't actively being worked and trying to be solved. And I think the other panelists have talked about the only kind of limiting factor is frequency and resolution and cost of data. So when I give my talks about remote sensing data, I always talk about the value triangle, and for every problem you're trying to solve, there is an equilibrium between spatial resolution, temporal resolution, and cost. Now that's a little bit oversimplifying, but I think in general it holds. And so for some problems, that 2 to 3 meter data may be just fine, and it fits the right temporal cadence and the right cost profile to deliver a meaningful insight to somebody that they can afford to use. So to me, I think we're doing a pretty darn good job at providing that equilibrium to the customers. But I think to Jimmy's point, when you get to sub-meter data daily, and in some cases, there are some constellations that we know of that are proposing multiple times daily, every spot on the Earth, sub-meter multiple, 4 to 6 times a day. That is where we get into making our mapping products and our mapping workflows more real time. Mm-hmm. And to me, that's the opportunity that's why Esri's investing in technology and platforms and tools to connect our users to the likes of my fellow panelists here who are either producing data or producing derived insights, because ultimately what we envision is a fully interconnected world operating in real time. And so I'm not going to say that's a missed opportunity. We're just not there yet. It's where we're going, though.
Does anyone not want that to happen, though? I mean, is there an extent to which a certain government or a certain corporation, whatever, doesn't have an interest in us being able to see so much of what's happening everywhere in the world at every minute of the day?
Well, I think surely there are security concerns, privacy concerns that come up quite a bit. I think this is just my perspective. I think that the greater good for society and the greater good for mankind that will come from what these technologies can produce, or the answers that these things can produce in terms of sustainability, combating climate change, getting organizations to carbon neutrality, I think are really outweighing those concerns. I mean, we're taking steps to deal with privacy, we're taking steps to deal with security, but honestly, I think that that most people in this industry see that the good outweighs the potential downsides. And as long as we're working to mitigate the downsides, the good that we're creating is what's driving, innovation in this industry.
Great, thank you. Omar Ali Al-Ansari, you're Secretary General of Qatar Research, Development and Innovation, obviously involved through your research in many industries, and particularly studying food security, climate change. Tell us, how could the industries you're most involved in through your research potentially benefit from the kinds of high resolution data that's starting to come online now?
Yes, I think as data becomes more accurate and improves in terms of resolution and frequency, the kinds of activities that we're interested in revolving around food security. Already we have researchers doing exciting research in our research institutes in the country related to mapping, for example, the quality of soil across the country. And that's incredibly important if you can imagine being able to accurately map out the quality of your soil across your country that informs the kinds of policies and decision making related to where, for example, should you have agriculture within a very arid piece of land, an area of the world which is very arid. And if you can imagine we do that very well, the kinds of information that would be useful to inform how we supply water to these farms, for example, which is also very important in very water scarce areas of the world. And if we can do that effectively, and we know that a third of the world is desert essentially, then the kinds of learnings we can have in Qatar when it comes to solving for food security using satellite data would be relevant to huge swaths of land. What is also interesting as well is, I think we've talked about sub-meter resolution. I think it's also interesting to talk about subsurface resolution. What's happening under the ground is also very important. We have some researchers in our research community also working on developing technologies for satellites that can give better resolution on what happens with underground water aquifers, which are also incredibly important for dryland countries. And the kinds of impacts that either man-made or natural have on the depletion of these water aquifers. And the world is very connected. A depletion of a water aquifer in the Saharan desert, interestingly, has a climatic effect on North America. And you can have droughts in California due to dust being emitted from the Saharan desert due to depletion of aquifers. So we have research in that space. So all these areas are local in nature, but also have a very important global impact.
Thank you. That brings me nicely to Wade Barnes, the CEO of Farmers Edge, the future of agriculture in a changing climate. But just to start off, Wade, a lot of the hype around space AI focuses on this ability to analyze huge stacks of data harvested from imaging the entire globe. But what happens when you take it down to the single farm? Can space imagery, how does space imagery make a difference compared to all that on-the-ground soil analysis and drone surveying that you do? I mean, couldn't you manage without it?
Well, I think that the reality is that you want the scalability. The issue with drones is the concern about being able to manage huge tracts of land. And if you think about North America, you've got well over 400 million acres of arable land that's highly productive, and that are generally farmed by smaller scale farming operations. An average farming's size of a farm in the Midwest is 800 to 1,000 acres, and so each one of those farms are making critical decisions. It's their livelihood. How much fertilizer should I put on? When should I put it on? And so one of the things that we sort of think about is that the technology that's coming from space is going to be able to scale this up, but we're also going to have to sort of validate and ground truth this with some of what I like to kind of call the ground game, the ability of utilizing soil moisture probes. But I can tell you, if you've ever dealt with installing a soil moisture probe on a farm, it's not the most accurate piece of technology, but if you can utilize that to understand better from a satellite and be able to use a satellite to scale out from there, eventually, if we can retire all the soil moisture probes, I'll be as happy as the happiest camper around. So I think that satellite imagery has a huge opportunity to really make a big change. I think hopefully companies like Farmers Edge can move that adoption, move that ability of using AI to actually make that type of impact. And one of the critical things that you're seeing that agriculture has gotten a bit of a bad rap when it comes to climate change. There's a lot of fingers that get pointed towards ag, and we really see ag as part of the solution, but farmers are generally terrible at telling their story about all the things that they do. They're very private, but they make a huge impact on the environment, but they need to be able to communicate that. And I think that, whether it be satellite imagery or just the ability of getting better data from the farms so that they can communicate that story. And it's the first time in history that you can actually, the farmer can have connectivity to the consumer. To me, that's game changing. There's always been so many people that's insulated the consumer from the farmer, and technology has allowed that for the farmer to go around that and meet the consumer. And I think that if agriculture and farmers can embrace that, creates significant opportunity. It's just a total leveling of the game. And not that I don't like big companies. I mean, but at the same time, farmers are always worried about the Cargills and the Bears. And I think technology enables a small farmer in Iowa to be able to position himself as good as any big company out there. And that's just really exciting, especially for a farm kid. So
I can imagine. Just to stick on the whole issue of climate, and you did say that sort of sometimes farmers aren't their own best sort of salesman. I mean, there's huge demand for carbon credits these times. These days with big corporations wanting to offset their carbon emissions, but there's not enough supply because a lot of the carbon offset projects don't seem to be very good quality and they get rejected or their results cannot be checked. Sticking with you, Wade, I mean, do you think there's anything coming around the corner in terms of technological advances that could help remedy that situation, and does sort of space have a role there?
For sure. I mean, so right now we've just launched our Smart Carbon program about a month ago. So we're super active in this space in North America, actually signing up carbon contracts as you speak. But when you talk to buyers, the number one thing when you talk to a carbon offset buyer, they go, we want carbon agricultural offsets. But we hate agricultural offsets because there's no real trust and transparency. It's, the farmer has to self-report this in. And when you really get into things like tillage, how do you know the farmer didn't go out and till his field? You're not going to be able to go out to a farm in the middle of Moose Jaw, Saskatchewan, to be able to see whether a farmer had gone out and tilled his fields. But the ability of using satellites to be able to track that and be able to understand, I think, is huge. And again, the more credibility that you can put into these offsets, the more viability that this new carbon economy is going to have. And man, agriculture is going to play a huge role. And I think that space is going to really position agriculture to make that impact. Now, I mean, farmers don't like the idea of Big Brother watching them, but at the same time, if you're in the business of selling an offset to a company, you got to make sure it's quality. And when you explain it to a farmer that way, I mean, that's kind of pride. I mean, their word is their bond. And so suddenly, if you're doing everything right, you don't have anything to worry about. And if you can use satellite image to validate what you're doing, and that gets you a premium in the marketplace, then that seems like a really good idea for all parties.
Just a quick sort of specific question. Has it happened that a farmer went and tilled his land when he shouldn't have, and some company monitoring, carbon capture sort of pointed it out? Or are we not quite there yet?
No, you can monitor that for sure. You can. So that's something. And I again, the frequency of the data and the higher resolution is going to be really important. And then the next step is, the ability to be able to determine the carbon organic matter that's in the soil from that's a ton of work. We go and do a ton of soil testing, and being able to determine that, if we can start to use AI to determine that, I think that's going to, again, help with this whole market going forward. So I think we're at the tip of something really interesting. I think there's an element of validation that has to happen from the ground that works really well with satellites. But I think 5 years out, I think the satellites have a huge role to play going forward.
Richard, bringing you in here, given the sort of sweep of industries that you work with, how important is climate offsets and all these, reducing carbon footprints? How important is it as a source of business for your company?
It's a mega trend for us. I mean, we're seeing it daily, just really take off. And the reason why I was so interested in what Wade was saying is because, we have customers on both sides of the equation. We have customers in the ag space, and we have customers in they're looking to acquire carbon offset credits. And what's interesting is that a lot of our customers on the ag side are actually coming to us and saying, help us develop a solution that gives our customers confidence in the carbon offset credit that we're selling. And then my customers on the side of buying are coming and saying, help us develop a validation approach to make sure that the carbon offset that I'm buying is valid. And I can't name names because these are some very large multinational corporations, but I'm seeing a massive amount of investment, both from corporations and from in the VC community into startups around this topic of identifying a carbon credit, measuring it, monetizing it, and then validating it. And I think that's going to be one of it's not a missed opportunity because we're working on it, but as these sources of data proliferate, and Devaki actually said it well, it's not just red, green, blue pixels. It's all sorts of data types that are going to come together, and they're going to create this carbon market that I think is going to be the next big market. And I think it's going to be a big driver for everything all of us are doing.
I think Jimmy wanted to come in here.
Yeah, I just wanted to add something there that one of the things that a lot of people don't realize about satellites is that if you put a satellite into orbit, it necessarily orbits the entire Earth. So if you put up a drone over your field, great, you got data of your field, but it's just your field. If you put up a satellite, it will go over Manhattan exactly as many times as it goes over a random spot in the Sahara Desert or a random spot in China. So once we build algorithms, as a number of us have, to count, say, chlorophyll atoms. So if you use just a few standard spectral bands that are on pretty much every satellite, you can essentially count chlorophyll atoms in a field. And you can see it in every field. It'll go up, and then when harvest happens, it'll go back down. So you could literally use the same technology to determine wheat harvest in North Korea or in Qatar or in sub-Saharan Africa or in Kansas. And get an actual uniform measurement of the productivity, the carbon offsets, the activities of those farmers. And that has tremendous applications, not only for carbon credits, but also for establishing international insurance policies for farmers, international loan policies for farmers. These are facilities that U.S. farmers have had for decades and just take advantage of and just assume they're going to have the ability to get loans for their inputs, assume they're going to have insurance if their crop fails. That doesn't exist in most of the world. And satellite, I think one of the really exciting things we can do in ag with satellites is use this universal standardized data on things like NPVI to start to roll those things out around the world.
Thank you. Devaki, you wanted to weigh in.
Mm-hmm.
Devaki, are you there?
She's on mute.
Sorry.
Oh, she's on mute.
I want to emphasize two things, which is the first is, the satellite data that's already there is very much focused on EO bands. I think, as Jimmy mentioned, you could identify chlorophyll, you can identify water, but there are a lot of exciting things happening with other types of satellites coming out online. For example, you could determine if there's metal underground. You could determine if there's methane leakage. So imagine a world, and by using FLIR sensors on satellites, imagine a world where there's so many different types of sensors out there on satellites. You're truly building a holistic picture of the world that may not be just directly visual. Water content, etc. So that's kind of the first part. But the second part is, how do we not only build an understanding of what is happening right now, but use satellite imagery and this type of data to build future resiliency, right? So using satellite imagery and satellite data to say, hey, we know that certain parts of the world are going to be affected much more than others due to climate change or shifts in climate change. Let's start monitoring XYZ. For example, let's start monitoring the amount of distance between dry vegetation using an NDVI index plus pulling utility infrastructure and distance between that and saying, hey, this is where you need to clear out dry plants. Let's start using it to track bodies of water. Hey, over the last couple of years, we noticed that over time, this particular very important reservoir has decreased by 1 foot in the last year, but in the last 3 months, it's decreased by 3 feet, right? So I think if you build structures around resiliency, then you're more likely to then move faster towards policy change of maybe you're supposed to then put those black balls on top of a reservoir. So I think that there's something to be said of, it's great to monitor, but let's actually put in policies using satellite imagery or this type of data, then build resiliency to helpfully slow down the effects, the very real effects of what climate change is going to be affecting all of us on this call and everyone around the world. So I think there's a lot of work that could be done if all of us collaborate on this call to build something, and imagine us using Esri and making policy decisions on the visual tools that they have. I think that there's something to be said about marrying all of these pieces together and building something for fundamental policy changes globally for climate change.
I'm going to bring in Yasu here because I know a lot of the opportunities opened up by his technology will be climate related. I mean, did you already have sort of launch customers investing beside you who are in the climate space, and who's going to be the first to benefit from your image data?
Thank you, Tom. I don't think Axel Space is the single player contributing to this, whole movement. We're just, trying hard to be part of it. Just to echo what everybody's saying and probably add to that is I'm a strong believer in obviously EO data, and why is because I believe that picture is worth 1,000 words. So when seeing is really believing, picture really can convey a lot of things, and also help, as many of the panelists has been saying, validate what people are trying to communicate. So it opens up opportunity for farmers in Indonesia, for example, to sell their carbon offset now, because they can use a satellite which will visualize what they do and give peace of mind to someone sitting in, let's say, Tokyo, that what the Indonesian farmer is claiming is actually true. And this COVID has, I think, really brought opportunity for remote sensing industry, because by nature we are forced to do remote sensing because we cannot travel. So I think our current challenging macro environment has brought actually an opportunity for us, and kind of proved to the industry that sometimes remote sensing does work, and it is a necessity to further advance our society.
Jimmy, how much of your business is actually about helping customers see what's happening in their own factories and farms and other facilities, and how much of it is observing what's happening at their rivals or their customers or their suppliers?
That's a great question. Generally speaking, our customers hopefully know what's going on at their own facilities. I mean, if they actually need our data to figure out what's going on in their own plants, then I think they have more fundamental problems. But everybody has suppliers, everybody has customers, and everybody has competitors. And those problems get to be quite interesting. Like, for instance, one of our customers that's been public about this has been Unilever, and they buy a lot of palm oil. And they have made a serious commitment to the sustainability of that palm oil supply chain. But that supply chain, when you go out from their facilities, radiates out to literally millions of smallholder farms across Indonesia. And they do not have the data in their ERP systems of the addresses of all of those smallholder farms that they're buying from. So we've literally been using a combination of satellite data with anonymized cell phone data and other data sources to build for them the structure of that supply chain and identify the concessions that their palm oil is coming from. And then we can use the satellite data to understand which of those concessions are being harvested sustainably. So it's their supply chain, right? But it's giving them critical insights into the supplier sort of supply tree coming into that supply chain. And in other cases, we have customers that are looking at their competitors, whether their competitors' facilities are being hit by COVID, as well as their customers, whether their customers are back online. Are their customers' factories back online and so about to place a big order with me or not? And in the days of COVID, that's another critical thing to understand.
Believe it or not, we don't have a huge amount of time left. Maybe we could go through each person and sort of say, what for you is the most exciting innovation coming down the line that will change your business the most in coming years? Maybe I'll start with Richard. Put you on the spot there.
Oh, no, that's okay. I just didn't have my finger on the mute button. So from Esri's perspective, I mean, again, I'll kind of reiterate, we're here to aggregate. We're here to connect people that are doing the work of building satellites, generating data, analyzing that data, and getting that in a consumable form to business decision makers and policymakers. So for me, it's a combination of all of the compute and AI technology that's going to be able to harness all of these different sources of data. I'm going to be trusting my colleagues here to produce all of this wonderful stuff. So what I have to be worried about is, do we have the scalable, resilient software platforms and tools to do what we need to do with all of that and actually create that near real-time experience, or those business processes that are informed in near real time from all these sources of data. And there's still work to be done there, by the way. We have not necessarily arrived. So that's what I'm focused on. That's what's important to me. It's really around the enabling and aggregating technology.
Over to you, Omar.
I think what intrigues me is, with this trend of macro data and global data being collected, being more comprehensive, being more real time, being cheaper and being more accessible, I think this will put the onus on all of us to innovate in our collective decision making. So I think it's actually, the innovation will be in human behavior, how we actually deal with this abundant data, this real-time data. I think that's where the innovation will be. To a large extent, when it comes to policy making at the national level, we are using local data. But as this data now becomes more global and more transparent, it really puts the onus on regional and global institutions to put their hands together and figure out how they can collaborate. For example, if you take an air pollution problem in one country, you can use satellite data to very much create policies that can help you mitigate air pollution issues within your borders, except that air pollution doesn't know borders, right? Air pollution transcends borders, and many of these issues transcend borders. So I think over time, over the next few decades, I think we will be seeing an evolution in global decision-making platforms and the way we actually, as humanity, are able to work together to properly leverage this data for the global good. I think I'm intrigued by that trend in our behavior.
Thank you. Jimmy.
Yeah, perfect timing. I was just thinking, Omar hit it, I think, for me as well, that today everybody goes to Google search, right? So if you're a reporter reporting a story, you go to Google search. If you're trying to figure out where to get your car repaired, you go to Google search. I would see a time coming when everybody will rely on satellite data, whether you're planning your supply chain, whether you're planning what crops you're going to plant on your farm, whether you're trying to understand how to measure carbon offset credits. All of these questions can be answered by satellite data, and I think it will become just part of everybody's workflow. And it will just be natural that if you want to know something about the Earth, you'll turn to the right spectral band and the right satellite, probably hidden behind an AI system and a platform, so you're not going to know you're using shortwave infrared or something. But you will ask an AI system, what's going on with truck traffic in Cairo, and it'll just tell you. And that will just become part of how we think about managing our economies and managing the world.
Thank you. Wade.
Yes, similar to what Omar was saying, but more of a focus on agriculture. I think agriculture is going through a digital disruption right now, and I think technology is going to be the great leveler. And Jimmy had mentioned before that North America's had an infrastructure of crop insurance and lending, but I think technology is going to open that up to the emerging markets. I think you're going to see reinsurance companies and large banks go into certain parts of the world that would have been pretty scary before, and suddenly now farmers that have never had access to, call it, modern style insurance and lending will get that, and you'll see suddenly crop yields improve because of that. The North American farmer has been thought of as, quite leading edge, but the reality is that they've had a risk management system that's allowed them to take risks, and the rest of the world hasn't had that. And I think that technology is going to do that, and I think satellite imagery is going to enable that, because now insurance companies won't have to worry about sending some poor adjuster out to the middle of the Mato Grosso or Voronezh, Russia, to go do a crop insurance claim. They'll be able to do it accurately from their offices somewhere. So I think that's kind of cool. I think the titans of agriculture in the future will be different than who the titans are today.
Yasu.
Sure. So we truly believe that the Earth observation data will be the new platform, as everyone else is saying. And from an actual space perspective, we truly hope to deliver quality data to bring clarity on what's going on in our planet, so that we can provide a peace of mind to our customers who are using our data, that they're making decisions based on informed information.
Thank you. And Devaki.
Thank you. I agree with all the panelists on the call. From a crowd AI perspective, I think what would be really incredible is taking the AI and putting it directly onto a satellite payload. So what you're actually getting is automatic results directly off of the satellite to give the analysis in a form that's extremely digestible immediately. Imagine a world where it's not just pixels and images getting streamed down, but the exact answer that you want immediately.
So the ultimate in edge computing.
Yeah,
I think that's possible. Have you seen these edge computing devices? They're quite small compared to, 100 kilogram satellite. So I think that could be an incredible future. And it is possible because AI is getting there, satellite's getting there, payload is getting there, it's getting cheaper. That I think is something that we could, that I'm personally really excited about. Great.
And if one person could weigh in briefly, I just had one sort of final question. Is the regulation keeping up with the pace at which this sort of revolution in data is actually happening? I'll take anyone's view.
I think it depends on where you are.
Exactly.
Honestly. I would say, being in the United States, I think we have certain aspects of our regulation that are very good, and then that are encouraging innovation in this space, and then we have other regulations that are woefully outdated and need to be addressed.
Like, for example?
Well, I think we've got some rulings from the last presidential administration around AI that are just nonsensical.
Yeah, I think as an AI company, definitely that's something, especially from satellite imagery, I'm very well aware of these regulations. But I do think, to Omar's point, that some of these issues are cross-border. A lot of these issues around climate change are cross-border. So you need to enable the best in AI and intelligence to, go beyond these like country-level regulations around AI and satellite imagery.
And one very quick, brief last one. The demand for this data, from everything you've been saying on this panel, it seems huge. I mean, is there going to come a point when it's going to become, more affordable to just, if your current customers will be sending up their own satellites, because the cost of satellites is falling?
I just my take on that is I don't know that would happen, but I think what will happen is that the imagery will get more and more temporally frequent. They'll get to be more and more of it. And what happens is the more temporally frequent the imagery gets, the more applications there are that are enabled by it, and the more the cost of the final analytics is reduced, the more customers there are. So I think we will see this nice spiral effect that will drive more and more demand for satellites, more and more satellite launches, and more applications.
Is anyone worried about the issue of space debris? In terms of, you've got a problem if all these satellites one of them just goes off the grid because it's been hit by some object, then some of the customers' critical systems could go down.
So imagine putting AI on a satellite to avoid that space debris, right? But
that's the next step.
Wants to do space travel. Potentially, that is a little bit scary, but I'm sure that Yasu and his team are solving that as well.
I'm absolutely.
Well, I just want
every confidence he is. We better wrap it up there. But so thank you so much, everybody. That has been a really interesting discussion, and it sounds like you're going to be collaborating more together in future. So if there's anything we've achieved, then it's certainly that. Thank you very much again. I'm Tom Pfeiffer, and all the best.